is CIP Group 1, and our group consists of Olivia Roberts, which is myself, Sarah Tidy, Amber Thompson, and Cody Hobb. And we chose to do our cultural immersion learning project on the HELP and the African American culture. The reason we chose The Help is because that we thought it was a common movie that had been seen by a lot of us, and we wanted to compare the similarities and differences, as well as address the issue of discrimination between now and how it was in the 1960s when the movie took place. And we wanted to see if this was still present, if it was the same, if it was different, what was the same, and what were the differences. um, to preface the paper a little bit, if you haven't seen the movie, I wanted to read a short bio on The Help. If I can find it. And I'm reading this from the imdb.com website. It says, set in Mississippi during the 1960s, Skeeter is a Southern society girl who returns from college determined to become a writer. She turns her friends' lives, and a Mississippi town, upside down when she decides to interview the black women who have spent their lives taking care of prominent Southern families. Aibileen, Skeeter's best friend's housekeeper, is the first to open up. To the dismay of her friends in the tight-knit black community, despite Skeeter's lifelong friendships hanging in the balance, she and Aibileen continue their collaboration, and soon more women come forward to tell their stories. And as it turns out, they have a lot to say. Along the way, unlikely friendships are forged, and a new sisterhood emerges, but not before everyone in town has a thing or two to say themselves, when they become unwittingly and unwillingly caught up in the changing times. And this film was written by Walt Disney Pictures. So moving forward, we believe that this movie has become important in today's society, so we can see how far the African American culture has come, but how far we believe they can continue to go, um, by ultimately eliminating discrimination altogether. This movie and research project has led to the opening and engaging view of diversity within our group. We were able to see how much we have learned and how much we still have to learn from and about diversity. We think that racism has come a long way, which it has, and that educating the public about racism and diversity will help them understand the steps that we have to take for it to continue to grow in the leaps that it has since the 1960s. We also believe that this process will eliminate racism altogether. I was also in charge of making a recommendation, and we strongly believe that this movie should be viewed by others so that it can help people understand the differences that they may not be subject to because of their own race. I know that this was the case for me, and not even just race, but just the age of me and my parents. We never had to experience being a slave or people owning slaves. And so this movie or well, not necessarily slaves, but just the discriminations that happened back then. We never had to have the experience of that. So watching this movie kind of puts into perspective of how badly African Americans were treated and how much growth they've come from and how much growth we can continue. This movie obviously highlights a discrimination in the 1960s, and it also makes you think about our current discrimination. I found a couple good critiques online, and one that really stuck out to me, I researched it real quick, and the first line was, "The Help is a safe film about a volatile subject." And I was like, okay, that's going in my paper because it was the perfect line. And I think that it's so true because nowadays, discrimination and diversity and talking about whites and blacks or African Americans or Caucasians, it's a very volatile subject, and a lot of people get heated up very fast about it. But this movie is not about being on one side or the other, it's about bringing the sides together. And I think that that's why Mr. Roger Everett said that line, is because he strongly believes that this is a great film to bring both cultures and ethnicities together in creating diversity in both of their lives. I also found one on the opposite side of the spectrum. This woman's critique was very interesting to read. It was very long and detailed and negative. And I can totally see where she's coming from. Her name is Roxanne Gay of the New York Daily News, and she was very appalled by the movie. There's a very long quote from her here, and she pointed out things that were infuriating that completely overshadowed what the few merits it did possess. She said, "Everything looks good, and all the actors were sincere to their duties, but on the big screen, the glaring offenses from the book are displayed in high definition. There were black vernacular greats like talking to a white woman and saying, 'You is smart, you is kind, you is important.'" And that kind of thing, to her, I think what she was getting at, just made her feel that they were de-educating this woman and de-educating the African American culture in a way, and she was very turned off by this. We thought that her feelings were emotionally rallied and that she didn't thoroughly look through the movie. She didn't note any of the positive effects of this movie. She simply focused on the negative ones, and we thought that was a little rude of her critique, as some of the others talked about both the positive and the negative. As said before, this movie was meant to address the differences and assess the relationships that were formed between these two cultures throughout the movie and in a very difficult time in American society. We believe that this opens doors for people to understand and continue this process in today's society, and this is why we recommended for this movie to be seen. And now I'm going to pass it on to, I believe, Amber, and she's going to talk about the purpose of our paper and our hypothesis.
Over time, the rights have improved for African American people, the education system has improved, and there is more equality. We related racism to the movie The Help. In The Help, it shows the relationship between the African American women and the Caucasian women. The movie is based in the 1960s, and we related that to today, and we did some research about the racism today. There are negative effects that have to do with the discrimination, such as the unfair treatment and the mental abuse. According to CNN, 49% of people think that racism is a big problem still today, even though it has greatly improved compared to where it was. Our methods for some of our research include going to events and doing our own research. We got help from the BCC and Society of African American History and Culture. There was some bias in our research just because we got people's opinions. There are some people that think that racism is okay, and there's other people that think it's a big problem, and that's where the bias comes in when doing our research.
We found that racism has declined in the United States, but it's not completely eradicated. By going through the different events and speaking to different people, we learned that racism, more about racism, and how it still affects people every day. Each of the events that we each went to taught us something different. It really opened all of our eyes to see how it really affects people, why people are still racist, and we felt that it showed the ignorance in today's society. We also find that the help, even though it was based in the 1960s, was an actually very accurate depiction of how racism still exists in today's society. We found that the more educated people are, the more open they are to other people and how they are and who they are as a person. We learned that the more educated the person, the more accepting they are. We really learned that racism is still in effect today, and we found this through interviews and what people were saying, because African Americans are still obviously looked down today in society, and it's because people are ignorant and people still believe that they are better than others.
By the process of watching, thinking, and then acting upon what was learned from the movie The Help, I feel people could eliminate discrimination. The Help shows racism in the 1960s. It also helps people think about racial issues that still exist. Another thing The Help does is it provides a medium to draw comparisons and learn from what characters went through as far as learning and eliminating discrimination. It makes people realize that discrimination/racism is still around today and has not been eliminated. I think The Help would be a good movie for people to see, to educate people about discrimination and what needs to be done to end it. The Help